say, have you got me good side? I just get insulted. Good evening. If you do have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. A massive welcome to Cara, St. Louis, an American lady now living in London and just round the corner from the Grenfell Tower, incidentally. Hello. What did I tell you? Cara's talk is entitled Reverse Engineering the Trance. Our Trance, maybe. She's an author and has worked with Hal Kautz-Vella, Mark Devlin and Maria Wheatley, amongst others. Cara will cover false history, sovereignty, food, the power of the human imagination, possibly demonic control mechanisms, and touches on the mysterious Fae. Please welcome Cara St. Louis.
Well, yes and no. Hello, St. Anne's, and shout out to Mark Devlin for putting me in touch with Rob, because I've seen lots of videos from and lectures from this series, and it's really a fantastic thing. And so I'm proud and glad to be here tonight. One thing I do want to tell you before we start, though, is that you may or may not know that foundationally my thing is the imagination. I will spend the rest of my life talking about the imagination in one form or another, because it is our mechanism as human beings. And so for the longest time I didn't have a thing behind me like this, because I thought it was a bit rich for me to talk about the imagination and not ask you to use your imagination. However, I did a lecture in Vienna about 1.5 years ago, and there was a fellow there who told me that really we did need these presentations behind us. And the reason that we need them is because, listen carefully, they engage your subconscious. I want you to hear that, because every time you sit in front of a presentation, that's what's happening. Your subconscious is immediately being engaged. I think it's fair to tell you that. Okay. Also, this particular lecture, Reverse Engineering the Trance, is now actually Reverse Engineering the Trance Let's Go Deeper. And that's because I've discovered in the last 6 months or so that I'm talking in front of some pretty clued up audiences. And so we really do need to go a little bit deeper. It's time to, start talking about the next level down, or the next 2 levels down, or 3 levels down. It's time to move on. So that's what I'm trying to do, is create a deeper lecture. Additionally, I have been very, very lucky lately, in the sense that some of the people that I talk to around the world about various research subjects have brought me things that have literally blown me away and deepened my understanding and my ability to flesh things out for people and for myself. And so I have especially yesterday morning, I conducted an interview for myself, for my channel, with a fellow called Dan Schreiber, who's in Australia. It was a conversation that I started to have with him last year, and then I've never got a chance to finish because I just kind of got pulled away from him. Anyway, so I tried very hard to add that material to this lecture, and so that's why you'll see these teeny tiny typey things in there that I quickly put on, but I will read them to you. You're not going blind. It's because I had to do it that way. Okay? All right. So I'm told I can do this, and it will go. Yes, it does. So listen, I will tell you about myself. I will. I want to. But I want to talk about you first. Okay? I want to talk about you first, because if you know who you are, then your mind cannot be colonized. Your mind cannot be programmed if you know who you are, but you don't. No one knows who they are anymore. And it's really, really important that we start bringing that back. So this lecture also includes different pieces of the various pieces of research that I've done. All right. So, as I said, my whole thing is the imagination. Who are we? The human imagination, this is my postulate. I came up with this a couple of years ago and I'm living it and breathing it. The human imagination is the translator between the morphogenic field, which is pure potential, and the material plane. That means everything you see, you've created. Okay? We are the creators. We are the original magicians. We are rare. We are the only creatures, in my view, we are the only creatures in the universe that can do this. That's what answers the question, why us? Because an entity that could not do what we do, but very much wanted to do what we do, would seek to find our gift and take it, or failing that, bend us to its will and change us such that it or they could make us do what it or they cannot. In other words, we have a couple things going on. We've got a predator and we've got parasites. Okay? There is authentic intelligence and there is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, whether you consider that to be a computer or not, doesn't much matter. Artificial intelligence seeks to do what we cannot do. It seeks to create the things that we can create. Non-enlivened entities represent artificial intelligence. For example, every piece of technology around you is a dim copy of a capacity that a human being already has. Okay? I learned that decades ago when I was in teacher training. I'm also a Waldorf teacher, Steiner teacher. I'm at the end of that career, but 20 years ago, one of my professors said to me, you do realize that a computer is just a dim replica of a human brain, right? And I do mean a dim replica. These are unenlivened creations. They're not life. Artificial intelligence cannot create life, but if there's artificial intelligence, there's also authentic intelligence, and that's us. We enliven everything. That's our job. We enliven them. We are the original magicians. We are still magicians, while this parasitic predator cannot ascertain the location of our imagination, which is the heart mind. It can use us in drastic ways. Our heart mind is the location of the imagination. It vibrates at a frequency that the predator can't see. It cannot locate the seat of our imagination. What it can do, though, is convince us it doesn't exist or that it's trivial. How many times have you heard the words, oh, it's just your imagination? It's not just your imagination. Your imagination's everything. It's our magic. Okay. There are two things I want to say tonight, well, amongst a million. First, we are blood sacrifices and energetic banquets. And I'm going to explain that. Of course. Second, they've contained our language, that is to say the English language, to the point that we are only casting the spells they want us to cast. Now we have no idea we are doing this on a conscious level. I have to give a shout out to somebody called Paul Rippon. Do you know that name up here? You might. I think he's a northerner. Anyway, he amongst other people do a lot of really good work on language, the English language, and how powerful it is, and how magical it is, and how we cast spells when we spell words. Each letter is a spell. Each word is not a spell. We spell words with letters. Each letter is a spell. This is who we are. However, you know, you've been told, you've heard reports that we're being dumbed down. Absolutely true. In the sense, especially, that they've contained our language. Okay? Our vocabulary could be as vast as the entire planet. We use this much of it. We use this much of it. And we use this much of it because we're constantly recasting the spells that they want us to cast. We're living in their world in that way. And we don't know that. And why do you think we don't know that? Because we don't know that we're magic. We don't know that we're casting spells when we speak. This is how we create with our voice. Imagination, voice, yes? It's how this is in the lore that goes all the way back as far as you can imagine. Okay. Why us? Did you move? All right. Why me? Okay. Why me? All right. This is an interesting story because it's kind of turned into a saga. The saga of an activist. But I want to tell you this story because it's about my mom. And my mom is the reason I'm standing here right now. My mom and my children. I mean, you can understand that, right? Mark Devlin asked me the other day, said something like, I don't know why we do this, or we do this because we have children, right? And if you didn't have children, would you care? Would you be looking this deeply? Would you know what you know? Would you be as brave as you're being? Probably not. Okay. Tomorrow is July 11th. In the United States, we call that 7/11, which means something to us, all of these 11s, you know. Tomorrow's the 7th anniversary of the day that my mother was killed. Now, my mother had a very high security clearance with the U.S. Navy, and she worked all kinds of places. She worked for weapons in Virginia. She worked for the Office of Naval Research in London. She worked with Operation Paperclip scientists and Eastern Bloc scientists, and she worked with all kinds of companies in Hawaii that were trying to get defense contracts from DARPA. Okay, she saw a lot of stuff. She was a technical editor, all right? And she never could tell me what she was looking at except to tell me that it scared the hell out of her. She couldn't tell me. So on July 11th in 2010, she was living down the street from us because she'd moved to Maine. She knew that her grandchildren were getting ready to leave home, and she wanted to be near them. And she was walking to church about a block from her flat. And she was just about to the other side of the street when she was run down by a van. And she was thrown yards and yards and yards away. And she was still conscious when they took her to the hospital, believe it or not. And 4 hours later, she died in my arms. Tomorrow's the 7th anniversary of that. That's how I came to be standing here. Because from the moment my mother died, something inside me said this wasn't random. And if it was random, I want to know that it was random. Okay? So I started to look into it, and all the people that my mother worked with at the Office of Naval Research especially were studying things like atmospheric physics and electromagnetics and plasma studies and psychology and all of those nasty, nasty things that the military uses to control us and each other. So all I had to do was open my computer and start looking around, and it took me about 5 seconds to come up with chemtrails. And then it was about electromagnetic weapons, and then all of this scary, scary stuff that's right there for anybody to see. They don't hide it. They don't hide it. They have to tell us what they're doing to us, or it just doesn't work. It's like the law of black magic, okay? Anyway, that was really scary for me, and it took me months to kind of start adjusting to the situation and the horror of what had happened. And then I realized I wasn't getting any information about my mother's death. I had to get an attorney to get in touch with the local police department so I could try to get an accident report. I was the sole survivor. She was 74 years old. What's the deal? How come it's so tough? I didn't understand. And I'd never did about November of that year, okay? I got a letter in the mail with no return address, hand addressed. And inside was the very simplest police report you've ever seen. So somebody was trying to get me the information, but they didn't want to know where it came from. They didn't want me to know where it came from. It was hand addressed, all that stuff, okay? Meanwhile, we're coming up on Christmas. I'm driving her car around. Someone tries to run me into oncoming traffic. Stuff like that starts to happen. Then, December 31st of that year, you may remember, or you may not, because you're kind of far away from that territory, but there was a fellow called John Wheeler. Jack Wheeler was a very important man. He was security advisor to several presidents. He was a liaison with the Pentagon to several arms manufacturers and technology companies. He was a specialist in atmospheric weapons, okay? He was also responsible for putting together the Vietnam War Memorial. On December 31st of that year, they found his body in a dumpster. And by the way, to this day, we still don't know. That's still not been investigated. I mean, Now, I'm not saying that my mother knew this man. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it drove home this idea that civilians working for the military are expendable, and that has been confirmed by several people I know who are very high, who have been very high up in the military and are positioned to know. Civilians are just expendable. You know, they're loose ends. They get cleaned up all the time. It happens a lot more than you might think. So I'm starting to think maybe the feeling that I have is right. Okay? The very next day was January 1st, 2011, 1111. That was the day all the blackbirds started falling out of the sky in Arkansas, 10,000 at a time. And all the hundreds of thousands of fish washing up on the shore. Okay? This doesn't happen by accident. It never happens. It's not natural. There's nothing about it that you can claim to be natural. And when they did a necropsy on those animals, they discovered no outside lacerations, but all of their internal organs had been exploded. They'd imploded inside. This is an electromagnetic weapon, or it's a microwave weapon, or it's a test. It's a test for sure. And chances are John Wheeler was killed because he knew about that. And there was some reason to think he wasn't a safe guy anymore. Okay, so it was at that point I decided to really seriously start looking into this, and I started writing The Sun Thief. I don't know if you guys really even know my work, but this is the first book that I came out with that had to do with any of this was The Sun Thief. The Sun Thief has been translated now into German and Dutch both. This is how I met Harold Kautzvella. He translated The Sun Thief for me into German. Yeah, then it was mid-April of that year, 2012, when it was finished. Mid-April of 2012, when it was finished. My steering had failed in my car while I was writing it. And then the day I finished it, this is what happened. That's my house. That's my house. The day I finished writing The Sun Thief, my house burnt to the ground. I still do not have a smoking gun. I don't know that my mother was murdered, but hello? I have a mountain of circumstantial evidence, okay? Luckily, 2 of my children weren't home. One was having a sleepover on that top floor. My ex-husband just happened to go upstairs all the way up to the 3rd floor, use that bathroom for some reason, and realized that the house was on fire and got them out. I ran back into that and got my thumb drive out of the computer. Thankfully, that was The Sun Thief, because I thought, if you think you're burning this book down, you've got another thing coming. And interestingly enough, the fellow who helped me work on the aviation in The Sun Thief, Mark McCandlish, said it's interesting because if they had just left you alone, you probably wouldn't have written that book. Right? Anyway, so that's oh, I'm not done now. There's more to add now. There's more to add. Okay, so I came to England. My husband now, the fellow I'm married to now, went to one of the David Icke Wembley things, tracked down a German documentarian and interviewer that he knew about, and convinced him to interview me. And that's how I started getting interviews in Europe. Initially, it was Germany. Okay? Now, I have to say that book got me work with David Icke. I worked on The People's Voice as a producer and a writer and a researcher. And it's done amazing things to help people understand the idea of chemtrails, because it's fictionalized and people love a good story, because that's the other thing we are. We're storytellers. All right? But let me tell you something. My activism has recently also cost me my teaching job. And I knew it might, because all activists are faced with this. We're all faced with this. If we're going to stand here and tell you the truth, or what we think is the truth at any given time, and be honest with you, it's going to cost us. And so even though I knew I was done teaching at the end of this year because they were harassing me about my activism, in fact, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they told me to go and not come back. So now I'm going to end up in a lawsuit with a school. Yeah. Anyway, so that's why I brought my books here. This is the new edition of Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. I don't know if anybody read the first edition that I wrote with Harold Kautzvella, but this is the second edition. It's almost 600 pages. And I brought it, and I invite you and encourage you to buy a copy tonight, because now this is how I'm supporting myself, at least for now. Okay, that's me. Me is not as important as you. All right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Yes. Okay. So, there's a lot of ground that's been covered. There's a lot of ground that's been covered. We're all getting really clued up on this stuff. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about making these great big laundry lists about what's coming down on us from the sky anymore, because we all kind of know. And I'm more interested in a different aspect of that right now. I was giving an interview to Richie Allen on The People's Voice one day about the Santi. And he said to me, Cara, there are two questions that people always ask me when in relationship to chemtrails. And I already knew what they were going to be. What's the difference between a contrail and a chemtrail? And too many people would have to know about it, so how could this possibly be happening? In that moment, it was like I left my body, because I was looking at that. I was looking at a hamster wheel. I was looking at this meme, this hamster wheel that we cannot get off of, because those two questions have been answered to death, okay, and very well, and scientifically, and believably, and all of those things. And yet we cannot make ourselves stop asking those questions. So I needed to find out why. Why is it that we're surrounded by these hamster wheels? Why is it that not only are we people who will not stop asking these questions, these simple, simple questions that keep us running in place, but we are people who will allow this to happen to ourselves, and we are people who will actually participate in this, thinking that we're doing something good perhaps. How do we get there? How did we get there? So that started me on another avenue of research, and that's the social engineering aspect. Okay, that's what came next. It's a very organic path that you get on with this. All right, but first of all, let's just really go over some of the toxins, and I'm just going to list them really quickly, and there's a reason I'm doing it, all right? So bear with me. We're talking what? The usual suspects: aluminum, strontium, oh my gosh, we could all recite this list, couldn't we? Aluminum, strontium, barium, arsenic, cadmium, and now lithium. They're dropping lithium on us in the States. Okay? NASA has admitted that. Dementia, by the way, is now the #1 killer worldwide. The BBC just reported that. It has to be so obvious you can't hide it for the BBC to come up with it, right? All right. Strontium, in particular, I want to talk about later, because it's a bone marrow seeker. Strontium is a bone marrow seeker. Now, I ask you, if all of this stuff that's going on in the sky has to do with global warming, why are they looking for my bone marrow? Why? I just want to know that. You know, it's mad science. It's medical experimentation without our consent, as kind of a fun bonus for them. Somebody's doing something very specific, and as a fun bonus, all the mad scientists in the world are playing with us. That's basically what's going on. All right, and we'll talk more about that later. Now, oh, no, nanoparticles. All right, I'm going to read it because it's teensy. Nanoparticles are smart dust. It's everywhere. We're breathing it in. At night, turn off all the lights. If you're in a dark area, you can do a strobe light, or we used to call them black lights. Yes? Into the air, and you can see it's filled with stuff. Submicron sized particles all the way up to stuff that you can see, and we're breathing it in, and it's going in through our mucous membranes, and it's going in through our skin. It's coming down on us all the time. It's just barely outside our visible spectrum, okay? The definition of smart dust: it's a system of many tiny micro-electromechanical systems, such as sensors and robots and other devices that can detect, for example, light, temperature, vibration, magnetism, or chemicals. So in other words, they can target various places within us, okay? They're usually operated on a computer network wirelessly. Most of what I want you to understand about nanoparticles, though, is that they're self-unpacking, self-replicating nanobots. Okay? Once they're in there, they self-unpack and they self-replicate, and they're submicron size, so they're crossing the blood-brain barrier all the time. I have a little model of what one of these babies does, these nanobots. Am I supposed to? Okay. I'm sure it was, but you know it's me. They all hate me. Got it? Okay. Here's an example of one in your... Yeah, just go down. There you go. Anybody seen this? A simulation of a nanobot around a neuron. These are all inside us, everywhere. Now watch this. Yeah, it's probably targeted that particular neuron. Check it out. What does this have to do with global warming? I just want to know. Thank you very much. All right. One of the things we want to talk about a lot is frequency. I don't know how much time we're actually going to have to do it, because there's a lot I want to say to you. There's a lot I want to say to you, and it's very wide-ranging, okay? It goes from the seed race of the Fae, which is who we are. I've been doing work on that with Maria Wheatley. We have a book out about that. To today, okay? The electromagnetic human. In fact, 99% of all our cellular cells are water. We are a saline, balanced life form, and that makes us a resonant life form, among other things. The language of the universe is frequency. We resonate to the earth when they let us. We resonate to the galaxy when they let us, to the universe, to each other. And false frequencies are wreaking havoc upon us, fracturing our RNA, which then replicates in that fractured way. They manipulate our emotions and our health with frequency. I don't think that you have the same situation here yet that we have in the United States with a landscape that's dotted with Gwen towers, do you? That was Bill Clinton's legacy. He calls it that to the United States. And those Gwen towers have very little to do with my mobile phone. They do have to do with emitting frequencies that cause us to respond in certain ways, emotionally, physically, mentally. It's about making us dance by emitting a frequency that causes a frequency in our body, causes us to respond, these frequencies, okay? We will talk about frequency again as well when we get to the sun, which we might be at. Nope. All right, let's just look at this real quick. Confirmed chemtrail substances. Again, it's just a list. Barium, nanoaluminum coated fiberglass, radioactive thorium, cadmium, chromium, nickel. I know why now, and I'll tell you in a minute. Desiccated blood, dried blood cells and plasma cells dropping from the sky on us. How come? And the question I have never asked yet, and I'm not really even sure why, where's this blood coming from? What kind of blood is this they're dropping on us? Where's it? I mean, that's a question, isn't it? Okay. If you want to know more about that, by the way, and you don't know who Clifford Carnicom is, you need to know cliffordcarnicom.com. I will always, always, always tell you who my sources are, because you need to go do the research yourself. I'm just giving you sort of an overview, even if it is a deep overview. Clifford Carnicom in the great state of New Mexico in the United States has been doing 20, maybe more years of research on the medical effects of this. He's got the slides, he's got the peer-reviewed science, he's got the data, okay? So if that's your thing and you really want to dig, go to cliffordcarnicom.com. Okay, mold spores. Mold spores kill us. Yellow fungal mycotoxins, ethylene dibromide, and polymer fibers. I just want to tell you guys that. All right, here we go. Here's some of the new stuff, at least part of some of the new stuff. This ends up being about blood, the sun, food, and the infection. This is what I'm finding out. And I'm bringing you a different, hopefully I'm bringing you the same epiphanies that I had yesterday, okay? That's what my aim is. I knew about the antiseptic sun to begin with anyway, because this comes from Sophia Smallstorm, who's, in my view, one of the cleanest researchers out there. And I was listening to her talk to my friend Mike Williams, and she talked about this idea that the sun is actually antiseptic and the moon has septic qualities. And if you think about that, it's really true. It's that balance of sepsis and antisepsis, of life and decay, which we all know is very natural to our planet, to our Earth. The sun is warm. The sun is a certain temperature. The sun is healing, okay? The sun tends to have an antiseptic quality for us and for the planet, anything living on the planet. The moon is the exact opposite. I'm not dissing the moon for those moon fans. I know there's lots of moon fans out there. I'm just saying that it is more septic. It is cold. It's a silver light, whereas the sun's a golden light. Okay? And it's the balance of sepsis and antisepsis. And it's the 24-hour parallel to the seasons, really. Because you have winter where everything's decaying and being septic and becoming food for the next burst of life, which is in the summer at its height. So that's septic and antiseptic as well. Weather manipulation is screwing up that cycle. Getting between us and the sun is creating a more septic environment for us. Because anytime you reduce the effects of the sun, you're reducing the antiseptic qualities of the sun. Anytime you're messing with weather and you're causing trees to bloom in January and you're causing winters that go on for 9 months and then snow falls in Arizona in, July, those sorts of things, you're pushing the Earth system off its rocker. You're confusing everything. And essentially you're making it extraordinarily difficult for it to maintain this septic-antiseptic balance that's really necessary for us and for the planet. I'll talk about the sun again in a minute because it's really important. Let me just read this and make sure I've gotten it all for you. The sun's now understood to have an antiseptic property for the planet and everything on it. At night, the dark, when the moon presides, a bit of sepsis is allowed to grow. There's a critical balance in this day-night cycle. We also understand that information is transmitted to us through the sun. We'll talk about that in a minute too, in biophotonic energy, which is no longer a question. Biophotons have been proved up one side and down the other. And the fact that we take them in and we use them for sustenance in very real ways. Frequency and light, that's what it's about, okay? Biophotonic feeding. This is something that Harold and I were talking about with audiences, I don't know, a couple years ago probably. But most everybody is talking about it now. Most everybody knows about it. 24,000 units of biophotonic energy come through your body each and every day. Your body does something with that energy. Okay? It is how we sustain ourselves. And if it's how, and this is going to lead me into a different conversation later as well, but if it's how we sustain ourselves, then what is the 1,500 calories of garbage going in for? What's that about? We have to think. Radical thinking is what's going to save us. We've got to do some seriously radical thinking. And those are the kinds of things we need to think about. All right. Again, we have a parasite. We have more than one parasite. And one of the things that the parasite feeds on is our energy. And not only does it feed on our energy, it feeds on our negative energy. More than anything else, it feeds on our negative energy. We'll talk about that. But it also feeds on this biophotonic energy. And so my question yesterday or my question, my wonderment. Let me just put my wonderment out there for you. My wonderment is this: if biophotonic energy is something that this parasite needs to live, why doesn't it just take it? It doesn't just take it, it takes it after we've transformed it. Okay? That's important. The human body is a filter for what's coming from the sun. It is, I don't want to say it's a disaster because power to stop it. But I do want to make note of how important it is that the sun's been dimmed by 30% minimum now. That figure's an old figure. I don't even know what the new figure is. I also want to talk about the trees, because if we're talking about CO2, if we're talking about an over accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we're talking about deforestation, then and killing the trees with these metals, which we are, these trees are refusing to uptake the aluminum that's in the soil and basically shutting themselves down, which is a form of suicide, then we're getting less oxygen. The planet's getting less oxygen, okay? That's what's going on with the trees, is we're getting less oxygen. So why kill the trees? I mean, this is a question that we need to ask, and maybe we can think about that together tonight. There is also, I've learned, in a system of trees, there's a mother tree. And the mother tree and all of the trees within this system can communicate with each other over a space of about 100 miles. Now let's talk about water just for a minute. Water is the blood of the earth. The only difference between plant blood and human blood is one molecule. It's iron. It's one item. That's the difference between the plant blood and our blood. And the blood of the earth is water. And if you're familiar with Emoto's work on the memory of water, that water actually holds a memory. My view is that this is what, okay, let me just make sure I state this. Give you the two premises first before I say this next thing. It is in the predator and the parasite's best interest that we never find out or never remember, who we are and what we're capable of. Getting rid of our memories is really almost job one. All right? The memory of our planet lies in its water. The memory of our planet lies in its water. And frankly, I'm pretty convinced that this is what fracking is about. Destroying the planet's memory. Because no other reason for it. And we all know it. Okay? That's my theory, is that this is what fracking is about. Okay? Disrupt the frequencies, eliminate Aboriginal cultures because they have a frequency that resonates with the earth. Stop us remembering. Cut the memories off. And really they've been hitting us pretty hard with that for just the last couple centuries. When this actually started is debatable. There is an infection. I think we can maybe agree that there's an infection. When it came, not so sure. It may have started millennia ago when our seed race, the Fae, showed up on this planet. The Fae created everything with sound. The Fae didn't need any of this stuff. The Fae and all of the indigenous populations around the planet were very highly sophisticated. They just didn't have machines. But they certainly knew how to use the earth or work with the earth to make magic. So getting rid of the Aboriginal cultures has been job one. And if you don't mind if I interject a very strange question right now and then save it for later, let's park it. But let me ask you, because this is really interesting, is there anybody in this audience who has Aboriginal blood? No? Okay, we're gonna park that. We're gonna come back to that later. Okay. Anyway, let's just talk, let's be on water briefly because I want to talk about something else right now. Yeah, There we go. This is the new stuff, and I'm going to have to read it to you. This is what I had to do on the train because this just came to me. Teeny tiny, isn't it? I'm so sorry. All right, blood and food and the infection. Weird, huh? Our blood is also the holder of memory via the iron within. The only difference between plant blood and human blood is this, iron. Iron acts in the same way. Are you ready for this? Iron acts in the same way that the old recording tapes used to work. If you're as old as I am, you remember this. All right? By virtue of the relationship between the electromagnetic head and what amounted to the rust covering on cellophane tape. Rust is oxidized iron, okay? And as the sound was put through the heads, the EMAG aligned and arranged the rust in such a way that when it was put back through, it played the sound. Yes? Whatever the sound happened to be. Our blood allows us to record and play back. That's what the iron is about. That's why strontium is a bone marrow seeker. It's our memory that they're after. They never want us to remember who we are. It's not our immune system. You would think that that's the first thing I thought of, strontium. Geez, it's going after the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the marrow, yeah? Our immune system's in our gut. Most of our immune system is in our gut, not our blood, okay? Which we'll get to when we get to food. Our memories are in our blood, all right? Our blood allows us to record and play back. It allows us to convert what we take in and send it out changed. There we're talking about the biophotonic energy again, okay? So in terms of, say, chemtrails, I wondered about the chemtrail strontium. I'm going to tell you this again. See, I didn't read my own writing. All right. The other thing I'd like to know is why are there desiccated blood cells dropping on us? Why are there desiccated blood cells, dried blood cells dropping on us from the sky? What is that about? It's all about blood somehow, and why, where's the blood coming from and why sprinkle it over us? We are also giant blood sacrifices, such as we find in war. It happens because of the entirety of the human experience, mostly our connection with the sun. When I get to the sun, we'll talk about that. It's next. This is about bringing the earth to her knees, us and the earth. Okay, the first question I ever asked was, why get between us and the sun? When I started looking at the chemtrail situation, my cosmology says to me that this is an esoteric attack of some sort because of what I consider to be the spiritual nature of our relationship to the sun. All right? The sun is not a nuclear explosion. It's more like a dynamo spinning in a plasma. The relationship between us and the sun, which I spelled wrong, but isn't that interesting, is more like a relationship between lovers. We have to reevaluate our relationship with the sun. We are completely severed from all of these understandings. And that is why our minds can be colonized or programmed. I don't like the word programmed anymore. I like the word colonized because we don't hear that very often in this scenario. So we hear it. We hear the word program so many times that the word loses all meaning. Meaning just leaves the word and we don't hear it anymore. So now I'm using the word colonized. All right. The relationship is more like a relationship between lovers. You may blush or heat up when your lover enters a room, but that has to do with your own internal atmosphere, not anything from the outside. Yes, it's your reaction to something out there. Your own internal heat changes. Just as we digest our landscape, and we do, the sun is a collector digesting its own landscape. When I say we digest our landscape, which I might end up having to read again, what I mean is even the eyes must feast. We take in through our eyes, through our ears, through our skin. We digest our landscape. Everything that's around us comes in here and goes out there transformed. The grossest way that we do it is eating, chewing. Okay, but that has to do with the colony in our gut and nothing else. People don't digest food. The microbes in your gut digest food. You don't digest food. You're feeding this little colony in your gut. Anyway, the sun also digests its landscape. It is thought to be a collector, okay? Some say the sun is like a relay station. All the suns are like relay stations, transferring knowledge about their own landscapes until what one has is a vast universal library of sorts. Everything that can be known is being communicated via the sun and to us. So experiencing the sun in our eyes or on our skin is like experiencing a living library. Everything is made from energy, after all, which travels. It might be a measure of biological success, actually, to measure how well a system or beings capture and utilize light. Metal oxides block that light. Every time you put on sunscreen, if it's not some sort of natural thing, you're putting a metal on your skin, zinc oxide, yes? It blocks sunlight. All right? Different kinds of metal particles in the atmosphere block different kinds of light. That's what it's about. Anyone who wants to regulate the speed at which we receive what's coming to us, which many say is a major evolutionary download. I know I'm getting something from the sun. All right? Would want to regulate, to slow it down, any potential jump in consciousness, because a quick jump is going to wake us up. The sun also acts, as I said, as the antiseptic-septic cycle with the moon. All right? A dimming of the sun allows the balance to push towards sepsis, and the point is to bring the Earth's defenses to their knees. Just as in our gut, the Earth is covered with microbes. It's a cloud of microbes covering the Earth, and like bacteria, they evolve quickly and constantly to address a changing landscape of their own. It is like the chase of the century. Something wants these microbes to go down, and the microbes, like bacteria, are constantly evolving to deal with whatever it is that's in front of them. That's one of the reasons that the predator is unlikely to win the Earth, or to win in the end. There's all kinds of reasons, but it's one of them. All right, let's talk about this. Addictions. And just briefly, okay? One of the things that I've realized, and I am always going to be straight with everybody that I talk to, okay? One of the things that I've realized about how I bring my material is that we are so accustomed to the Hegelian dialect, okay? We are so accustomed to problem, reaction, solution, that I almost have to bring it to you in that way to get you to hear it. We are also addicted to adrenaline. And it's not our fault. We're addicted to adrenaline. They keep us just on the edge of a nervous breakdown all the time with all the negative stuff. Oh my God, World War III is going to start Tuesday. I just know it this time. And all the stuff that we have to witness constantly, right? They keep us on the edge of a nervous breakdown all the time to harvest our negative energy. And what that's about is adrenaline. Adrenaline is like an amplifier. Okay, we're constantly in a hypercharged fight or flight mode. All right. The other thing that we do that does not help us, okay, is that we eat meat, and meat is adrenalized. We are addicted to adrenalized meat because when you kill an animal, especially the way that they're slaughtered for consumption, what you, at the very end there, is a muscle that's infused with adrenaline. And it's the adrenaline that we're addicted to. So they have us by our addictions in lots and lots of ways, all right? Foods. My radical thinking about food is we don't need it. But it's a really powerful belief system. And belief systems can kill you. So I never say to anybody, stop eating. That's not what I mean at all. I'm saying to you that how we sustain ourselves is through that biophotonic energy. It is. All right? This other stuff that goes in, the three most addictive substances on this planet, unless adrenaline is one of them, I'm not sure anybody's looked at that, are wheat, dairy, and sugar. Now, I'm certainly guilty of putting breakfast cereal out for my kids every morning when they were little. Those are hugely addictive substances. They've got us by the short hairs, gang, because they're addicting us to everything. All right? Right after I wrote the first edition of Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, I started working on something called the workbook. I've actually got 6 titles out right now. The workbook is a series of what I call episodes. Episodes used to be a literary term. I'm taking it back from television. Television stole it, okay? They're really sort of 50 or 60 page bits of my research that you can take and run with. I'm getting ready to write the last episode for the workbook. The last episode for the workbook is going to be on food, the great con of food. Because I think about the food industries. Think about agriculture. Think about when we first sat down and stopped supposedly being hunter-gatherers. I mean, I have quibbles with all kinds of history, but when we started being agricultural and people started owning the fields and doling out the wheat and blah, 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 blah. And people started wars over food, okay? And think about everything that's around you that has to do with food. The trucks, the oil, the growing things, the tables, forks, knives, spoons. I mean, think about it, advertising. How much of your world is run by this giant monster that is the food con? I call it the food con. How much of your time would be freed up if that wasn't an issue? If you didn't have to clean and cook and prepare, and buy, prepare, grow, think about it. Oh, how much trash would go away? Okay? This is a huge thing to think about. Okay? It's one of the ways they've got us. All right. Let's just move on now, because that's very radical, I know. Oh, some more. Okay, more about the food and more about the infection. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Should I take a break? Yeah, all right, let's take a break right here. I'm going to do questions at the end and hope I can answer them, okay? Can you save your questions? All right, is it a 20-minute, 10-minute?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
15-minute break? Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
All right. All right. Yeah, I'm just about done with these tiny writing, and then I'll get back to the things that I usually research, which is the social engineering. But we're kind of all getting clued up about the social engineering. So I want to review it when I get there, so that if you have any questions afterward, we can talk about it. Anyway, we are beings who digest our landscape. It's a wonderful way to put it, I think. Everything we take in through our eyes, our ears, our skin, from the sun, and yes, what we may put in our mouths, it is ours to digest or filter. Although I will remind everyone, as I was just reminded, that humans don't digest food, microbes do. This is what some breatharians mean when they say that the human body is a filter. Then we emit what we have transformed, and this is the answer to the question, why do we have digestive systems? Because there's a colony of microbes living in there that we're feeding. It's an internal garden. We have such a disconnected, backwards way of seeing this energy that's out there. In fact, we emit, we don't just take in, but we emit ki and prana and energy and all of that. It is not out there, it's out there and it's in here. We are filtering all of that and producing that energy as much as we're taking it in. The reason we eat is to biosynthesize our landscape and to maintain the integrity of our current internal and external form. Now think about the blanket of other things that go along with putting things in our mouth. We just did that. The industry, the death, the agendas. We can eat food because we like to or choose to or want to. Yes? When we believe, this is radical, I know, but when we believe that we must or we die, then we are addicted. It's a radical statement, I know. How much energy is liberated without a food industry? We talked about that. We talked about the fact that we're addicted to adrenalized meat and the parasite feeds off the negative energy. And we also talked about the fact that I need to bring, when I'm bringing material to my audiences now, I can't just come to you and talk to you about the Sovereign Imagination Studio workshop that I put together, that people are working with me to regain control of their thoughts. This is a solution, yeah? It's a solution. I don't like hand-wringing books or hand-wringing anything. I don't like to end stories with, what are we going to do? Oh no, we're dead. None of that stuff. There's always a solution. There's always something that we can do. But I can't just come to an audience necessarily and start with the solution. People are not trained to listen to that anymore. They want to hear, the way I bring it is about 75% update on the attack on us, and then 25% what I find to be the solutions. And that's just how we are now, since 9/11 especially, right? Most researchers agree that there is an infection. We are infected. The questions are with what, or how many, or when did it happen? If you're familiar with John Lamlash, you know that he was talking about the Archontic infection that was revealed by reading the Gnostic texts that were discovered in Nag Hammadi. When that was, I don't think we can actually ever be sure because our history has been so messed with, okay? The infection could have come with our original seed race, the Fae, 40,000 plus years ago or more, millennia ago. It could have come a couple hundred years ago. There are people who insist that the tightening of the screws that's been going on for us for the last couple hundred years comes along with a new infection. Okay, but there is an infection on our planet. One sign of the infection is anything that separates us. The religions of the book are very good at separating us. Monotheistic religions are meant to make us forget our sacred connection to the earth. Monotheistic religions are all about artificial magic. They are lateral magic in the words of the tarot. You know, there's above, as above, so below. Everything that goes across this way is lateral magic. It's material magic. Incantations and movements and all of those very precise instructions that will earn us a place in heaven separates us from who we really are, and it separates us from this planet. Separation allows colonization of the mind, and colonization is a sign of infection. These religions taught us that the earth did not belong to us, but rather an all-powerful male deity and his son, perhaps, who were no longer around, and so there were stand-ins called priests and popes who mediated between our pitiful selves and the power that allowed us to temporarily reside on his farm. I'm right, aren't I?
Yeah.
When I asked you if anybody had indigenous blood, nobody raised their hand. What planets are you from? Did I say Aboriginal?
Yeah.
Aboriginal, Indigenous. All right. Let's pretend I said Indigenous. Questions at the end, dudes? Oh, okay. Would you have answered that way? Really? Okay. Most people wouldn't, though. And I get to ask you. I get to ask those people the question. What planet are you from, then? If you're not indigenous to this planet. But we don't think of ourselves that way, do we? We're always on the verge of leaving. We're always on the verge of leaving. And a lot of that has to do with these monotheistic religions that teach us this is hell, or someplace we don't want to be, or the worst, in the whole wide world. And what we're really trying to do is play the game right, the computer game right, so that we can get to the bonus round, which they call heaven. It's all garbage. It's crap. Okay? We are of this sacred planet. We're simply being separated from it. And we're separated from the planet to the planet's detriment and to our own detriment so that we can be colonized. All right. Interruptions in frequency are signs of the infection. If you stop Native American tribe from enacting their dances and beating their drums, as they do to communicate with the planet or any other indigenous or aboriginal, tribal, highly sophisticated, by the way, culture, you're interrupting the frequency. If you are Hermann Goering and you raise the frequency of musical transmissions, for example, from 432 to what is it now, 440? Where's my music, guys? Anyway, it's been skewed, it's been changed. We've been pushed off like the needle on a record, off the right frequency. Interruptions, any interruptions to a natural frequency are signs of the infection. And foods that go in that should never go in, that keep us tethered to this dimension in ways that we were never meant to be tethered. That is a huge sentence, and it's a lot to think about. And it's the area of my research right now. All right. Let's see. All right, here we go. Now, making it all normal. This is all about normalization. There has been a statement, was it by the United States? I can't remember now, probably, that the year 2018 was going to be the year they officially sanctioned geoengineering. That's when they're going to roll it out. Not 40 years ago or 60 years ago when they really did, but next year, which means we're going to get hammered next year, gang. We're going to get hammered next year, which is why I was saying time is actually growing a bit critical on this one. They have tried very hard, and they've done a pretty good job of normalizing the idea of chemicals raining down on us. And the way, I've just got a couple of examples of how they've done that. The first one is the one I like the most. Do you know who David Keith is? David Keith is a demon. David Keith is the spokesmodel for chemtrailing, really all over the world now, but certainly in the United States. He was a Harvard professor, also a professor at McGill University in Canada. By the way, David Keith owns the patent on a CO2 collection apparatus that turns CO2 into fuel. No conflict of interest there. Nope. Okay, so do I need to do this with my mousey? All right, watch this. This is one of the most popular shows in the United States.
Exactly.
Okay, so what do we do?
So the other thing is horrifying. It is that you could actually spray sulfuric acid into the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a kind of ugly tech fix.
You could spray something into the atmosphere to change. Okay,
spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
So in the end, pollution saved them all. We owe pollution. We owe acid rain an apology, is what you're saying.
It would be a totally imperfect technical fix.
Okay.
It would have risks. It wouldn't get us out of the long-run need to stop polluting, but it might actually save people and be useful.
Okay, so how, again, I interrupted slightly there. How does it work? How many planes are we talking about here? How do you do this?
So let's say you wanted to stop it warming in 2020. You'd start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets.
What kind of like a G6?
Yeah, like a G650.
Like a G6.
That's
like
it.
A G6.
And you'd put say 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year, and each year you have to put a little more. And this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in
No,
emissions.
we'll get to it eventually, yeah.
But it does.
But in the meantime, we're shrouding the earth in sulfuric acid.
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid.
It is.
You're bearing the lead. Is there any possible way this could come back to bite us in the ass? Blanketing the earth in sulfuric acid, because I'm all for it. This is the all-chocolate dinner. I still get to have my CO2, and I just need to spray sulfuric acid.
Right.
All over the earth.
Right question. But we put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay, and that's
so
good or bad?
It's terrible.
But it'll be better if we put more in.
We're talking about 1% of that, a tiny fraction of that. So we should reduce that sulfuric acid.
So if it kills 1 million people and we're only doing
bad.
1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here.
Killing people, not the objective. I just wanted to be clear. I just wanted to be clear. All right. Could an individual start this?
In practice, only a country.
Okay. What about a man in like a hollowed out volcano with henchmen who occasionally shakes his fist at the sky and says, "They said I was a fool at Harvard. Who's the fool now?"
It's the natural worry.
Want to shake your?
I won't.
Want to shake your fist and say the fools?
It's the natural worry, but I think in the end, no. This would be done by major countries, but the problem is how countries agree about where to set the thermostat, who decides, and my biggest reason for writing the book and for talking about it is my view that we won't make good decisions in ignorance.
So we have to have the discussion now so that when it becomes our last hope, People can say, hey, we talked about this. Remember, we said we get to do it.
The worst way to make decisions about this would be if we all agree that we won't talk about it in polite society, we suppress it, which is basically what had been happening, and then in 2030, suddenly in a crisis, we make fast decisions.
Maybe it's happening already. You ever look at those planes up there? They have contrails behind them. Maybe all those planes with the contrails, maybe they're actually spraying chemicals into the atmosphere right now, and Uncle Sam isn't telling us.
It seems extremely unlikely.
That the United States is not telling something to its citizens? That seems extremely likely to me. Read the newspaper. I think they might have your idea already. Dr. Mister, thank you so much. David Keith, A Case for Climate Engineering. We'll be right back.
It's almost impossible to unpack everything that's wrong with that clip. Okay? But yes, this is how it's becoming normalized. I can't believe we saw that on the Colbert Show. The next thing that I picked up was this director of the CIA making an announcement. If you can get that one to go. We don't have to listen to the whole thing. He's boring.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives. Now, I could go on and on and on and on about the things that fascinate me, but rather than talk about them, I thought I'd stop here.
$10 billion a year to do something we've been doing forever. I'm going to, can you open this Kylie on Chemtrails thing? This is the one thing that really lets me know how normalized this has gotten to be. You know who the Kardashians are, everybody kind of knows. Yeah? Yes. Are they here?
No.
Oh.
Well, we didn't want them over here.
Okay, I just need to be able to read that, and I can on here. Can I read it on my thing? This comes from her blog. One of the Kardashians wrote this on her blog. Okay, let me see if I can actually read it here. Let's ask ourselves, why did I see 75 planes spraying white stuff in the sky on my 15-minute drive to work? Who pays for this, and why is it happening? Is something being exterminated here? Is that something me? Does this have anything to do with why honeybees are dying off really fast? Why are some days normal with no plane spraying and others look like this? Who's responsible? What effect will this have on our health and our children's future? Whatever, thought this was a good idea. Okay, so if the Kardashian's writing this on her blog, which has probably got billions of followers, right? It's completely normalized. All right, this is how they do it. I'm studying the ways that they use gaming to normalize things with our children as well. Oh, I hope this doesn't mess me up. Nope. Okay. So, Sulfuric acid. Let's talk about sulfuric acid just really quickly. This is what David Keith was babbling about. What are the potential health effects of sulfur dioxide, which is what he's talking about. All right. This is from one of those manuals that people keep in hospitals and schoolrooms and things, yeah? Main routes of exposure: inhalation, very toxic, can cause death, can cause severe irritation of nose and throat. At high concentrations, life-threatening, accumulation of fluid in the lungs, pulmonary edema. Undiagnosed, untreatable mystery respiratory illnesses are the third leading cause of death in the United States now. Okay? Symptoms: coughing, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, tightness in chest, skin contact, corrosive, eye contact, corrosive. This is what that maniac is talking about dumping more of, and wrote a book about it and went on the Colbert Show to try to tell us that this was okay. Okay? So, put these events. Okay, this is important. I have spent a little bit of time on chemtrails tonight. I don't usually spend tons of time on them anymore because you put these events and substances in a paper bag. I don't care. 3 of the things that I just named that are raining down on us, okay? Close your eyes and stick your hand in the bag and draw any one of them out at random. Any of these should be enough to outrage us. Any one of them should outrage us. The most crucial aspect of this war is that we are not responding to the threat. How come? We're not battling for the survival of our children? Even? All right. So here's what a lot of the original and half of the new Dangerous Imagination was. It was my research into the social engineering of the 20th century. Modern war is a continual source of blood sacrifice and money generation, okay? That has to do with the Tavistock Institute. The Tavistock Institute is responsible for initiating World War I. They turned 2 populations who had no quarrel with each other against each other to the point that they were ready to rip each other limb from limb. The Germans and the English had no quarrel with each other. None. But they wanted a huge blood sacrifice and they wanted to generate money. War makes money. War is a money-making machine. We know that. The dismantling of the nuclear family, one of the things that makes us the most human, that comes from the Tavistock Institute too. Demonize the authoritarian father figure, which, by the way, in my view, is the sacred masculine. Send that mom out to work so you can tax both the parents and leave that child vulnerable, creating a vacuum where the parents would normally go. Separate it from its family very young and very early and send it to a school, which is nothing more than an experiment in subjugation. And it only takes a couple of generations before you change the narrative entirely. Because you have these innocent 4-year-olds at school or 5-year-olds at school. You tell them anything you want to. Make it up. Because that's what they've been doing for their own purposes. Mom and Dad are busy paying taxes. Dad has been now, have you ever watched The Simpsons and things like that? Dad's now ridiculed. Okay? There's no such thing as this like sort of respect for the sacred masculine anymore, and Mom's gone. She's working. She, in my country anyway, in the 70s, with the rabid feminism that developed in the 70s, we were taught that the worst thing that could befall us, fate worse than death, was to have children and have to raise them at home, stay at home and raise those children. Seriously, we were. When I first started talking about the sacred masculine, I was still looking over my shoulder because I thought somebody was going to get me. That's how inculcated we were and brainwashed we were in the States. I can't speak for Britain, but it certainly was going on there. All right, demonization of the authoritarian father figure. Insert any number of institutions there. That's the Frankfurt School. These are the Freudo-Marxists who came over from Germany when Hitler came into power. They were frustrated Bolsheviks, pissed off because the Bolshevik Revolution didn't work in Russia. and looking for a way to expand that worldwide. They adopted the crazy notions of Sigmund Freud, which have never been tested on anybody anywhere, and are still wreaking havoc on our planet. I've got an entire section in there on the psychiatric industry this time, all right? The Frankfurt School's postulate was at least, this is redonkulous, at least 10% of the population is crazy, mentally ill. And the only way to treat that 10% of the population was to treat the whole population. And the best way to do that was in schools. And that's what happened. And that's what's going on now. It's what happened then, it's what's going on now. Compulsory education. You got to be there, right? Send the moms out to the workforce, tax both parents, create the vacuum. What fills the vacuum? Well, we know. I'll show you in a minute anyway. I'll tell you something. When I was teaching and I was talking to parents, and they were talking about the fact that in Steiner schools there weren't really any computers or media, I said to them, well, I know in my country, this was Obama, President Obama insisted that children needed to be starting to be computer literate by the age of 4, or nothing good was ever going to happen to them. Certainly not in employment, right? And I said to them, listen, when was the last time you were in an interview and someone checked on that? When was the last time you were in an interview and they said to you, okay, so one more question, Rob, one more question. Were you computer literate by the age of 4? Because if you weren't, I'm sorry, I just cannot hire you. Okay? It's insane what they're teaching, what they're trying to do to us. All right. Anyway, off we go. Some parents thought that was funny and some of them didn't. All right, there you go. That's what you fill the gap with. We know this. The church, government, military. Mother Church, the government is a father. The military is a father. Medicine, they tell us what to do with our bodies because we couldn't possibly know. Schools, that's really where they have us. That's where they have us for sure. Advertising, media, music, television. That's all to get in place of the parents, guys. More than anything, where they really have us is in the schools. I don't know if you're familiar with this Prussian education system, Genesis. I know I've watched a couple of lectures here where people have covered that. Is there anybody here who's not familiar with this scenario? Couple people? Okay, really quickly then. It came into being as a result of the Battle of Jena, which was in 1805. The Prussian army was like this machine, this people-eating, people-destroying machine, and they were very proud of their military prowess. And they were beaten by this ragtag bunch of amateurs that were under Napoleon, and they really just couldn't handle that. So they were looking for a way to change that. They were looking for a way to make soldiers, really, who were willing to die for their country. That they considered that to be the greatest good, to die for their monarch. Now, does that sound familiar to any of you? Because it sure does to me. Are we not all taught that was the greatest good? Sacrifice our lives for king and country, or, United States. Okay? Still going on. That's the point, though. The Council on Foreign Relations, by the way, in the United States, designs our education system. If you've ever asked the question, where do my textbooks come from? Who decides what my children learn? Because there's really no answer to that question. Can you think of who does that? I mean, even as a teacher, I had no idea. But I tell you what, it's the Council on Foreign Relations in our country. And they got worried pretty recently that kids weren't staying in school long enough to supply the armed forces, meaning they weren't being brainwashed enough to think that what they really needed to do was join the army, amongst other things. But it's the CFR in my country who takes care of that. All right, anyway, Fichte, what was his first name? Johann, I think. Johann Fichte was a philosopher in Germany, and he wrote this thing as an answer to that failure called the Address to the German Nation, in which he basically said that German parents could no longer be trusted with their children clearly, or they wouldn't have lost this battle. And the insanity runs rampant for centuries and centuries and centuries in every culture. I used to wonder if what he really meant when he wrote that was to have something like this Prussian education system developed, because sometimes we write things and they have unexpected results. They do. But then I found out that he was also at the same time writing letters to the king, letter after letter after letter after letter, to try to get an education system in place that would do that, okay? At the same time, the Pope was released from prison. Napoleon had him in prison, and the Jesuits were restored. I still need to put those two things together, but you know what? The Jesuits have infiltrated every education system in the world. So in 1850, Minister of Education in France also imported the system, by the way. In 1850, compulsory schooling arrived in the United States, all right? The parents didn't want it, and it was only in one state that it was enacted for at least a decade, probably more. And those children had to be marched to school by the militia because the parents were rioting. Nobody wanted compulsory education, all right? That was brought to us by the industrialists, okay? The great railroad magnates and the industrialists of that period of time in the United States were confronted with an empowered workforce led by this character called a machinist. Now, I have had some machinists in my family, so I know what these characters are like. They're the people who build the machines that build the machines. They understand context, okay? They understand the whole, right? And if you understand the whole and you understand the context, then you can argue for your rights. If you don't, you can't. You've got to disempower your workforce, which is why compulsory schooling came in to play in the United States, so that they could tell them anything they wanted to tell them. That's also when specialization came into the United States, okay? Maybe you turned a screw 57 seconds out of every 60, and that was your whole job all day, every day. And you had absolutely no idea what you were building. Maybe you didn't have any idea what you were building. But if you lose context, if you lose knowledge of the whole, you cannot argue for anything, because you don't know anymore. You don't have an argument. You don't have logic. You don't have this, therefore that. Okay, so that was about disempowering the workforce. In schools now we have this thing called in loco parentis, which, by the way, does not exist in reality as a law, but it means in place of the parent. In place of the parent. Oftentimes schools, when they make decisions for your children, will cite this like it's actually meaningful. Well, you know, in loco parentis, they do not have supremacy over you as parents. They don't, okay? Even as a Steiner teacher, I'll tell you right now, what I advocate is homeschooling. If you love your children and you can manage to do it, get them out of state schools. And don't send them someplace that's running the state school agenda, but is some kind of co-op, because it's the agenda that's the issue. In Britain, you have tons and tons and tons of beautiful, big, wonderful homeschooling co-ops. They're fantastic. Use them if you can, because this is the primary place they have us, is in the schools. And if we could break that hold, we could do a lot. All right. The original stated goals of the Prussian education model were to make obedient soldiers, obedient workers, obedient civil servants, and citizens who thought alike on most issues, national uniformity in thought, word, and deed. Techniques were taken from the military and from the craft of animal husbandry, especially horses. So, there are experiments in the technology of subjugation, total surveillance, and total control of the helpless. And that is who your child is when you send them off to school. Imagine, actually, if you think about it, any other circumstance where you would hand your child over to a complete stranger. To a complete stranger. And just assume everything's going to be cool. All right. Oh, good. What are we going to do about it? Okay, this is the part where there are three things you do. You illuminate the lie. You reverse engineer the trance by grabbing pieces of it, chunks out that you can manage. If you try to look at the entire trance, you can't look at it. It's so finely woven. It is so beautifully crafted to capture us. It's not possible to see it. You grab chunks out of it and you examine them. All right, these are the 3 books that I've written that I think are really important. I'm just putting them up there for you, all right? Then you regain sovereignty over your own thoughts, will, and feelings. We do not have control of our own thoughts. If you think about what goes through your mind most all of the time, it's chaos and it's random and it's willy-nilly and it's this and it's that, and maybe it's something that has to do with a pressure of some sort that's coming from the outside, yes? Or they're the tapes that we run. We kind of all know about those, the mom tapes and the dad tapes and those things that come to us that tell us things that we don't really want to hear or need to believe about ourselves, all right? So it's necessary to create a tool with which one can bore the parasite to death. Only takes 5 or 6 minutes a day if you do it right. I've developed and I'm teaching a course, a seminar studio. I'm doing it online because that's the world we live in, and I'm doing it in person when, enough people really want to get together and look each other in the eye, okay? It's an act of imagination that we construct together. It's very much your own. It takes a while to construct it. I have to teach you to construct it. But if you do it every day and relentlessly, it will go a long way toward putting you behind the wheel again. If you're behind the wheel again, you can touch the morphogenic field consciously, because that's who you are, every one of you. The thinnest veil lies between you and your power. And it takes full spectrum dominance all day, every day to convince you that you're powerless. Yeah? And they're constantly coming up with new stuff, too, or refining their methods. And that's because we're always leaking out the side of our boxes. Because we're barely containable. Because that's how powerful we are. Okay? All right. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a couple of things you can do right now. First being throw out your TV. Just get rid of it, please. Throw out your television. Just do it. That's going to take you a long way. All right? Stop reading any kind of interacting with the mainstream media. Just stop. Those 2 things right there will go a long way. All right? We see the evil, we see the lie, we see the manipulation, but if we don't do something about it, we're just making more fear porn for the consumption of the parasite. Do those 2 things, and if I had a wish, the toughest sell of all, stop eating meat. Sorry, I know that's a tough sell, but I really believe that that's key. Okay, I really don't have anything else to say, and I'm over anyway. It's already 10 o'clock. Okay? I will take questions. Hopefully I can answer them. If I can't, I'll say so. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said something about that as well. Yes, I'm living 3 blocks from Grenfell Tower. I can tell you that when I was away on a trip with my children, my class, I took them on their class trip, and it happened the day before we arrived home. My husband was texting me about it, and I couldn't figure out what he was talking about because I didn't know what those towers were called. And I came home, and the Hammersmith line is the one I usually take, and it was blocked. It was closed because that building could easily fall on that line. And so I came the other way, you see. I came the other way. I didn't walk right into it. And I dropped off my suitcase, and my husband said to me, "Come on, let's go for a walk." So we walked out the front door, and it was probably about 15 yards to go around the corner. And I mean, there were people sleeping everywhere. Children and moms and dads, and I mean, with the shock look, war zone look on their face. And that was the immediate reaction, the immediate response from your beloved government, okay, was that all these people were sleeping rough. They were sleeping on the grass, man, in my neighborhood, all over the place. It was horrible. Children. All the schools closed down in the neighborhood, yeah? There were lots and lots of donations immediately, boxes and boxes and boxes piled high at all the churches and the community center and the leisure center and everything, right? Our area was closed off. My street was closed. The media everywhere, but not for very long. And then it ended up being the alternative media, which was great, right? Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire showed up. Helicopters constantly. Helicopters constantly. Our upstairs neighbor, when the helicopters first arrived, our upstairs neighbor went to go see out to their roof garden to see what was going on and said that they could see the tower and all of the floors on the top with the cell phones flashing, trying to get rescuers' attention, and people screaming. It's only 3 blocks from my house, so it would be easy to see up close and personal, that kind of stuff. Well, hang on, let me give my thoughts about that really quick, though. Okay, my thought about that was that there are 500 dead. And when they reopened the schools, that's when people started showing up missing. Do you know what I mean? That was, and I knew that was going to be when things started to get real, because the kids weren't coming back to school. And we might actually start getting some decent answers. Anyway, go ahead.
Sorry, before I let this gentleman speak, that particular building, when you Google building and you zoom in on it, it says that it's something to do with like a children's community centre or something.
The Grenfell Towers?
Yeah, the actual Grenfell.
That's bizarre.
When you zoom in on the Google Maps. I suggest people do that now.
Yeah.
Sorry, next question.
You speak about the predator that seems to have it in for humanity. What is this predator?
Yeah, everybody always asks that question. My closest guess right now is it's some kind of artificial intelligence that's just mowing through, mowing through us, using us, and using the parasites as well. I think those are 2 separate things. Okay? I see the parasite as part of the infection, and the predator as something else altogether, something that's kind of flying under the radar of all the chaos that's caused by the predator. Right now, I might think it's artificial intelligence, and the reason I think that is because we're being pushed into a binary state. We're being pushed into this 1, 2, 0, 1 computer kind of thing, when in fact we're really all the numbers. Okay, we are all the numbers. We are 1, we are 2, we are 3, that's the family. We are 4, those are the seasons. Those are being completely screwed up. Anything, they're the directions, the cardinal directions. 5, this is when you start getting into sacred geometry. 5 sides to the water molecule that actually pulls in the photonic energy, and so forth, up to 12, which is our natural number. But we're being cut off at 2. We're being cut off at 2 by the elimination of the nuclear family. To me, this is a hint that it's a duality. We're a polar. We're yin and yang. This is polar. It's not dual. Okay? That's why I think it's artificial intelligence of some sort. Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying about meat, especially all the processed rubbish that we're subjected to in this country,
Right.
which is quite a lot, especially in supermarkets, and the GM chain as well. But do you actually mean organic and grass-fed meats?
Yeah, I do. I mean, first of all, it's how they're killed that adrenalizes the meat. Okay. 2, for me, and this is just a personal thing, but for me, these are the other kingdoms. And we can't discount their sophistication as creatures in this world simply because we don't understand what we're looking at necessarily, any more than we can discount the fact that the indigenous tribes were tremendously sophisticated cultures. Okay? But because the people came with their technology and said, no, do you see what I'm saying? They were tremendously sophisticated cultures. They didn't need the technology because they were that good. So it's kind of like that. It's like it's the other kingdoms. I'm not willing to participate in the blood sacrifice of the other kingdoms.
Yeah, I get that. But as a human race, we are omnivores. We do.
Are we?
Well, we have canine teeth. I mean, I'm not a veggie or anything like that, and I know people who are very ill. But
Well,
I know people who are healthy as well who are into that regime.
Depends on what you think.
We eat different things, and obviously the processed meats, it depends what it's been pumped with, all kinds of hormones and water and this and that, and where you get it from. But I mean, one of my friends, he actually just eats meat, and he's very healthy. but he has grass-fed meat and organic.
Well, it depends on what you think sustains you, right?
It's really odd because really a lot of us don't have a choice. So,
Okay.
because of cost and
Okay,
all this other
fair enough. And it's worse in the States, I'll tell you that right now. When I moved here, I was surprised that organic stuff was just about not too much more expensive than the other stuff. In the States, it's 4 times more expensive to buy anything organic.
Yeah, and I think it's designed that way.
You better believe it is. You better believe it is.
Yeah,
You know, this is between this one and the false chronology, the false history timeline. These are the ones that people find the most radical. These are the ones that create, you know, a lot of cognitive dissonance because it depends on what you think sustains you. It depends on whether or not you actually get that there are 25,000 units of biophotonic energy going through you every day and that we transform that. Because what we think we do with food is transform it. We think we digest food. We don't. There's a colony of microbes in our intestines that we're feeding with that stuff. We're not feeding ourselves. We don't digest food. And that's scientifically, that's just a fact. It's just that we don't know that.
Just out of
It's the way we're
interest.
educated.
Exactly. See, it's the schools. Yeah.
Just out of interest, there's historical documented facts of an ancient Chinese man who lived to be about 280 plus.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have an exact date, but 3 different emperors had in China had all commented on his longevity of life.
Right.
And he commented to them that he only ate herbs and a few grains, and he ate very little. So he spent most of his time outside.
Right.
So,
And there's a Taoist.
So he was that's about 300 years old.
Right. There's a Taoist philosophy that says grains kill.
It's seeds and herbs.
And they just don't eat much of anything. They eat lichens and things. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was like herbal things.
yeah, that would feed the colony in their gut, which is our immune system.
Being
Rob.
Which
vegetarian-
is what they want
Yeah.
to kill.
Indeed.
Vaccinations.
Indeed it is.
Being vegetarian though is a choice.
It is.
But
Yeah.
I'm vegetarian and I have been for the last 5 years.
It is. And by the way, just FYI, there are days when if I would just, I would just love a double cheeseburger with bacon. Okay?
It's an addiction.
But I say no to that. And it's an addiction, and I refuse to participate in the blood sacrifice of any of the other kingdoms. It's,
I see that as a programmed
Yeah.
addiction.
yeah.
My partner Jane, she's what 30. Well, all her life she wants to be vegetarian, but early on she wasn't. So what 35 years,
Yeah.
something like that. So she's been a vegetarian. Next question. Right, Lisa.
No. I mean, you could. I don't care.
You can sing it.
Okay, thank you for the talk. It was brilliant.
Thanks.
I was going to ask, does David Keep have a way of protecting himself from his own attack?
Yeah, wouldn't you think? That's the thing. That's the thing you have to wonder about. Surely they do. Surely they have the antidote to all this stuff.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. But you think they're going to share it with us?
Have you heard of Organite?
Yeah, I have Organite all over my house. And my husband has built one of those, those things back in the backyard, although he did it with his, was it with No, it wasn't with Organite. It was with, what's that black stuff? Not goo. Please don't say black goo. No. Anyway.
Can you just, do you know what Organite is? Can you explain that to people?
Well, I don't make it myself, okay, but it transforms the frequencies coming into your house, doesn't it?
Does it absorb it? Or
Yeah, I don't have it. I mean, I was given a bunch of it when I was in Australia. I have a pyramid in my bedroom, I have a pyramid in my kitchen, and I have a stone attached to the back of my phone, my cell phone.
So we all need to get some.
Yeah.
Are there any other sort of ways of modifying the frequencies around your house rather than these different crystals?
Well, just the usual stuff. I mean, it's a constant battle to keep up with detoxing all the time, isn't it? It really is.
We have a regular member who's not here tonight, but she suffered from problems due to radio emissions, which she was extremely sensitive to magnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
She screened a lot of her home and put, screen mains in direct cables instead of having Wi-Fi. And stuff.
You can build yourself into a Faraday cage,
It's
I'm
pretty much
understanding,
along those lines.
if you want to. I'm really actually kind of lucky because I live with an alternative medicine specialist. And so he's constantly, everything that we do in the house is detoxing and detoxing and detoxing. I will tell you, I take 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 every day. That's the most important pill I take.
Good for you.
10,000 IUs.
For your immune system.
Yeah.
Right.
I take 1,000 milligrams of niacin. It's a huge detoxer of your blood.
The D3 generally made from sheep, by the way.
Is it? I don't know what it's made from because he does all this research,
So what
so.
was that, Rob? D3's made from? Sheep.
The wool of sheep, which is fine because it's actually against the law not to shear your sheep once a year, but I'm sure you guys know that. Because their wool never stops growing because of how they've been bred.
But they do shed it.
Huh?
They do
Oh,
shed.
the whole thing? Because I think they die.
It sheds.
That's
It
why it's
comes out in
illegal.
chunks, it sheds.
Okay,
But
10,000 IUs of D3, thank you, Rob, from sheep's wool. And I take 500 milligrams twice a day of niacin, the kind that makes me flush, by the way. Because if your capillaries are not expanding, what the hell is the point? Why are you taking it? Anyway, 1,000 milligrams a day will do a lot toward detoxing your blood. And by the way, it's a great antidepressant. I started taking it when my mother was killed. And I think I was up to like 3,000 mgs a day. And I found out about it by watching a movie called Food, Inc. Maybe you guys have seen it. You can get it on Netflix if you want, I think.
Neil, have you got any niacin? Oh, there you go.
Ah, there you go. And some other things, grapeseed extract I take. We've experimented with borax. Absolutely.
The big thing is, how far do you go to protect yourself? Or could you just rely on your beliefs?
Sure you could. But let's regain control of our own thoughts. That's an excellent question. It's absolutely an excellent question. Hell yes, we can do it all ourselves.
If it's all down to frequencies, and that's what we are, then your beliefs will change your own frequencies.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to rely on external sources.
And everything is to do with light as well.
Mm-hmm. Everything's light.
That's why we need the sun, and we need it through our eyelids and everything, but they
Yeah.
kind of block it.
Another
Right.
question.
Right.
But people need to know the measure of how much they're taking.
Yes.
I've worked in the food industry since '76, and I've seen it absolutely turn to a Frankenstein monster.
I'll bet.
People don't know what to do for the best. They're swimming and they're not getting in the right.
Right.
It's not
We
to
have
be
talkers
processed
here
foods.
who say, take MSM, do this, do that, do the other. They're going home, they're overdosing, they're giving themselves a massive dose of diarrhea, and they're giving up.
Yeah.
They need information from reliable sources
Mm-hmm.
who they can trust
Mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
know that they're not going to make themselves either more ill or totally skinned by buying so many different nutrition.
Right. Right. Well, it's a good point. It's absolutely a good point. You do have to find somebody.
But you've got to be able
You have to find somebody who can guide you for sure. Somebody with, proven results. And yes, somebody that you can trust, absolutely. But know that, okay, already, you need to already know that anyway. One of the main problems that, as well, is that we're then still continuing to put crap in our bodies. And a lot more of it is crap than you think. A lot more of it is crap than you think. And that's why regaining control of your own thought is so huge. Is this my thought? Is this my desire? Is this my decision? We don't know anymore. We have no idea that we're being driven from outside all the time.
Imagination. Imagination.
That's right. Yes, I mage in. Imagination.
A nation of magicians.
That's right. Absolutely.
Whether we know it or not.
That's right, whether we know it or not. Subconsciously, we're creating this stuff all the time. We're still using our magic because we've got our vocabulary harnessed to prove it by people who use it for black reasons.
you have a little bit on the Fae? That's all.
A little bit on the Fae.
In amongst a lot of them.
Okay, just a titch on the Fae. Okay, yes. You probably know that Maria, do you know Maria Wheatley? You must know Dennis Wheatley, her dad.
Oh, yeah.
I've never read any of his books. I didn't know who he was. I feel terrible. However, Maria and I became convinced that the research that I was coming across that had to do with the Fae was a mission, an order, marching orders in a way, you know what I mean? And the more I did research on the Fae, the more I realized that I was being called, and I actually self-identify as a Fae, as you all should, really. The evidence that I came across, the compelling evidence that I came across was that there was a race called the Fae. You can spell it F-A-E, you can spell it F-E, you can spell it P-H-E, you can spell it F-E-Y. A lot of the evidence is etymological. Etymology is the study of the derivation of words, the origins of words, and it is an absolutely accepted scientific form of research. And there's a man in Germany who spent his life like a John Nash character, right? Seeing patterns. He was an IT specialist. If you speak German, you can see him. He's done talks and they've filmed them. His name was Erhard Landmann. They're boring as paste because he was an IT guy, but you can hear him talk himself. I got his research. My husband contacted him. He's very ill. I think my husband's one of the only people who he'll talk to at this point, and put together this book with all of my research that, in my view, significantly suggests, if not proves, that our seed race was called the Fae. The Fae arrived here from a planet in the lower left-hand part of the Big Dipper. It's called Phecda, P-H-E-C-D-A. Now, they were, in our lore, much older than we think, by the way, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 years ago or better. We know them as the Tuatha De Danann. I bet you all know who they are. The Tuatha De Danann, the original Irish. They landed in Ireland.
I think they crashed in Ireland.
They crashed in Ireland, thank you, they did. And then those legends got changed to suggest that they came by boat and then they set their boats afire. But that's not what happened. They came in burning spaceships. And there are the two oldest Irish legends that still exist say that. They say they came from a different planet. Okay?
There's lots and lots of stories.
Yes. That's called Guardians of Blood and Fire, The Search for the Celtic Heart. Okay, and Maria she wrote about the last third of it, and I wrote the first 2/3 of it. In the end, that work is combined with work from a woman called Sylvia Ivanova. If you've not heard of her, she's got a YouTube channel called New Earth, one word, all lowercase. And if you start at the very first one of her videos called the Survivor Series, she believes that these people were alive as recently as 200 or 300 years ago. All of these unbelievable places that have been built, and everybody goes, gosh, I just don't know who built those. They're just left there. Or they think these things got constructed with soft stone hammers and things, and it's just not possible. It's because it's not possible. It's because there was a sophisticated civilization there. We've had a global civilization. We've had a global civilization of the most extraordinarily advanced that you can imagine. Differences being to do with climate. The difference between Peru and Norway was the freaking weather. But it's the same civilization. That's why you find hieroglyphs in Peru and then in Finland too, that they match. And yet we go, wow, how did that happen? Well, it happened because there was a global civilization. All right, anyway, that's my work on the Fae.
Jane has another question. What is your take on why we are being put through all of this?
I'm telling you, they want what we have. They want what we have. There's two things that are going on. The predator wants us to keep us away from the sun, and also they want to be able to use our imagination. We are the creators. We create. We're the only We're the only entities in the universe who can do it. That's how rare and special we are. We are the creators. We are. You are. You get straight, get a hold of those thoughts, those authentic thoughts that are your own, and you'll start to know that again.
It's like all the savants and things, sort of the additional creativity that is far beyond any normal thing.
Yeah.
And each of these
Good
things,
point.
We should all have the abilities to be able to do all of these.
Yes, and we do. And that's a very good point.
Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just one more thing. You say we're from the speed race of the Fae.
Yep.
But when the Fae crashed, they were documented by the other races that were already here.
Were they? Do you know that all of history was rewritten by 2 Jesuits in the 16th century?
I believe the Victorian in caves and some of the other articles.
Maybe. How do you date that?
Indigenous.
How do you date that, though?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because carbon dating is really, really dicey and inefficient and things like that. We just don't know. We just don't know these things.
My take on it, just my opinion, is that the Fae are just one of many, many cultures that have advanced here and been destroyed by whatever else is here.
You can think that. That's fine. It's just not what I think. Yeah. I actually think of the good fairies chasing the bad fairies. I think that, right? I think that the wars that we have now are part of one war that started then. And it's one searing, soaring battle that's never stopped. And the best way, easiest way, shorthand way for me to describe that is the bad fairies chasing the good fairies.
That's where Brian Froud got his characters from.
Brian Froud, yeah, I know. I don't know him, but I know about him, and I've seen his characters. And those characters I've seen in the space between waking and sleeping, those are jinn. You have to be careful because the jinn can make you think anything. So,
We have another question.
the jinn are an entity.
What is an entity?
Okay, an entity is something that exists in a plane. Okay,
Like a demon?
a demon exists in a plane, yes.
Can I just ask you as well?
Hang on
Your
a
mum
second.
did a lot of research and worked for Operation Paperclip
Mhm.
and various other schemes, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think she gained the amount of knowledge that you've gained doing your research?
She might have. The one thing that I can, because she didn't tell me, but the one thing I can tell you is that she knew damn well I would write about it.
She didn't tell you, okay.
No.
But you also said she was going to church. Was she a Christian?
I mean, I think that was more of a social thing for her because she had just moved to the town for about a year. She hadn't been there for about a year. It was a very, very small town in Seaside, Maine. So this is where the social life was.
Yeah, if you're that aware of the bigger picture, and you, Cara, I think your presentation's been brilliant. Don't get me wrong.
No. I'm just thinking of
You're grasping a lot of what I'm grasping. That it's almost Orwellian that we're taught. That
Absolutely, it is.
Like breakdown of the family's good.
Yeah.
We're taught that just everything's back to front, isn't it?
It's all reversed. Yep.
And this is the point I want to make to you now, is that I get your point on religion, but they are taking God, a creator, out of the schools, they're taking it out of our society, they're taking it out of our consciousness and replacing it with a materialistic, this is it, take it. Are you not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, perhaps?
Okay, you're going to have to help me with that question again. Taking God out of the schools presupposes that...
Out of everything. You're in effect, you're making things materialist as they're doing. I mean, you're talking about things you're not really sure of. I mean, you're like this 40,000 year thing, and the Fae, and all. I mean, and then at the same time, you'll say that religion's rubbish and the Bible's rubbish. But you'll
I'm actually saying that it was brought to us, that it separates us. It separates us from the planet, from the earth. Religion.
Yeah, religion
does. You're right. We're not the Bible.
But I don't think I actually...
I believe that a creator created everything and is adversely in birth and and smash everything to pieces, because that's what he said he would do. And that's
Okay.
exactly, your presentation was brilliant, and all I see is that it's an attack on the creator, as I personally.
You get to believe that. That's fine. Okay? I'm not going to argue whether or not God exists.
One last question.
Yeah, I too really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks.
I really just, I don't know if it's a short answer or too big a question, but do you see a connection between the push for 5G connectivity, wireless connectivity, and programmable matter? And there's a side one, a cheeky side one, whether or not the black goo subject matter is almost a deliberate distraction from looking at programmable matter, as a, But
Well,
the question's 5G.
Well, okay. There's a lot of people who think that that's the case. I will say that I have not researched it to the point where I can make give an opinion. But yes, there are people in the States, which is where the research that I follow, who think that's exactly what's going on with 5G. Okay. Now, back to your question about the black goo. The only thing I know about the black goo, whether like it or not, this is how I feel I know it, is that it's actually a lot of the Sun Thief was visions that I had, and I wrote down every vision that I had that had to do with my mother, okay? And one of them was a vision. It's interesting that you would bring that up today, as a matter of fact. One of those was a vision I had of her sitting in some kind of break room, someplace that she worked. I think it might have been Virginia, based on what I was looking at. But, there was a long table and a sink, and she was sitting at a table with a yellow legal pad. You know the kind I mean, right? And she was doing two things that she never does, ever in a million years. She was smoking a cigarette. My mother was a soprano. She was a musician. And she was eating a Brock's caramel. Those, and she had problems with her teeth, so she never would have done that either. But she was doing those two things. I still don't know why those two things. I looked at this yellow paper and it said top secret on it. That's all I could read. I don't know what else was on it, okay? And she said to me at that time, I tried to stop them. I don't know what she means. I don't to this day. However, at that moment, the room began to fill from out of the sink and across the floor and down the walls with this green viscous thing. Fluid, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like antifreeze that you would put in your car. Okay. This other thing I got from David, this other story I got from David, what's his name, about the black goo in the Gulf. Did you hear him speak about that? Dave, not Ike, the other one. He was on, oh God, it was with Miles, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyway. The day of the supposed Gulf disaster in the United States, supposedly every country that had a nuclear sub had a nuclear sub in the Gulf, and that's because there were people who were after the black goo on the bottom of the ocean, and the idea is that they were mining for that it wasn't for oil, they were trying to get black goo. A French submarine actually managed to get some of that on board, and then they ended up having to surface because so many French sailors were dying because the black goo can kill you, supposedly. That happened on 7/11. That happened the day my mother died. Now, it's not connected to my mother. It's just how my mother always tells me when I'm on the right track for something. Do you know what I mean? I get a 7/11 somehow, some way, when I know I'm on the right track for something. And because that happened on the day she died, I have to believe that there's some credence to that story. We don't hear that story, so it's not really a distraction. The only thing I really know about black goo is that Harold handled it. There's film of Harold handling the black goo. I took the film myself. Miles Johnston has it. He's buried it. He never shows it. Can you tell me why you wouldn't want to show film of Harold Kautzvella handling black goo and talking about it? I don't know. So this whole black goo thing is a real mystery for me still. I don't understand where it. Oh, and the other thing, by the way, do you know what the military nickname for black goo is? Antifreeze. So I don't know.
Well, it was discovered in Antarctica, wasn't it? So frozen.
Was it, or was it the
Still-
Falklands? I'm not
still
sure.
liquid. Well, same location more or less.
Yeah.
By the Argentinians. Anyway, I think that's it for this evening. Cara, Cara's still got some of the books at the front.